the next year until the bill is implemented, and hopefully not implemented because hopefully it gets repealed, is one, we want Section 9 to be completely repealed. Two, we do want sexual orientation to be written in as a protected right in Alberta. And three, we would really enjoy if we could get some protected rights written in for trans-identified persons.
Woo!
So we have a great line of speakers here. We have Rachel Notley from the NDP who has fabulously shown up.
Woo!
We also have Brendan Van Alstyne, who is a social worker and is running for City Council in Ward 7.
Woo!
We have Jan Biederman, who is a trans-identified teacher in Edmonton.
Woo!
And I will be reading a statement from Laurie Blakeman, the Liberal MLA, who unfortunately wasn't able to physically be here today. So let's start, Rachel.
Hello everybody, this is a great crowd. I'll just start by pointing out I've never used one of these before, so if you can, if you hear me spitting, I apologize now. And if you can't hear me at all, then just yell every now and then and tell me, but I won't go on for that long anyway. I promised one of our 14-year-old rally goers that we would make this short and pithy. So I'm going to try that. So I wanted to start out by saying to everybody how glad I am that you could all make it out to this very important demonstration to Albertans and to this government about how it is that we have not forgotten the stupidity of Bill 44.
Woo!
Yeah. I'd also like, especially as well, just to note in the crowd one other visitor that is here with us, the MP for Edmonton Strathcona, Linda Duncan. So now, the Minister of Culture and Community Services, Lindsay Black, had said to us, those of us who were concerned about this bill last spring, that we would forget about it in a month. Now, I think we're all here today to say to him that we aren't going to forget about this in a month, and we're not going to forget about it in a year, and we're not even going to forget about it in a decade. And there is a reason for that. We won't forget about it because this bill is wrong. It is premised on assumptions and attitudes which are unacceptable in the year 2009 in the democratic society that we live in.
Woo!
Those attitudes and those assumptions that we will all work together very hard to get rid of currently stand in the way for true equality for the GLBTQ community, and we will not stop until every reflection of those outdated views are removed from our legislation and from our province. So, they talk about us getting in 1 month. Well, we're not going to do that. But how about this instead? How about a decade from now, what we do is we celebrate. We celebrate the revocation, the 10 years from the revocation of Bill 44, and in particular, the removal of Section 11.1 from our Alberta Human Rights Code. That's what we will do. We won't forget. We will celebrate the victory that we will all achieve by continuing to fight this very, very bad piece of legislation.
Woo!
About why it is that this piece of legislation is so wrong. Well, first of all, I mean, many of us here are here today. Many of you are members of the GLBTQ community. But I'm going to start, first of all, by talking about the kids. Everyone likes to hear us talk about the kids. And this is a very bad piece of legislation for the children of Alberta. It is bad because it hurts their education. It limits their knowledge. It constrains their learning. It stops their critical thinking, their debate, and their progress. And that is not right. So that is why the bill is wrong. This bill or it chills debate in the classroom, and it hurts teachers. It puts them at risk of becoming the subject of complaints, legal complaints before the Human Rights Commission. And that is wrong. And in so doing, it creates chaos. How do we know that it creates chaos? Well, last week, the Minister of Education had to ask the Minister of Culture to hold off proclaiming this piece of the legislation until they figure out how to set up a system to deal with this piece of legislation. So, that is an indication to me that it's exactly as we said in the legislature 4 months ago, that this was a poorly thought out, poorly crafted, not very intelligent plan, frankly. That's what this is, and the fact that they have to ask for a year to figure out how to implement it tells me that they know it too.
Woo!
So we've got a year until this thing is proclaimed, and what we need to do is work harder to build the support to make sure that this government realizes that this is the wrong place to put our priorities. Last week we heard that the government is talking about cutting education funding in the middle of the budget year, taking services away from kids. Do you think that this is the time, then, that we should be asking them to set up more bureaucracy, more policy, more rules, more tribunals to punish teachers for teaching our kids tolerance? No. Absolutely not. So they didn't get it right when they put it into place. They can't even afford to implement it, and sooner or later they'll see that, and we will have victory, and we will get rid of this bill.
Woo!
So this thing is actually getting quite heavy to hold, so I'm just going to say a couple more points. You've all heard it before. We know that this piece of legislation is wrong because what it does is it takes what the Supreme Court of Canada gave to us 11 years ago, which is equality for gays and lesbians and queer and not quite transsexual people in our province, and told this government that they had to read into the legislation the fact that that equality was there. And what they've done now is they've actually undermined that very decision that we achieved 11 years ago.
Shame!
So we know that what they have done is they've created a second tier of human rights. We know that in schools, teachers talk to students about the need to accept people of different color, the need to accept people from different cultures, the need to tolerate and include people with different abilities. But what this legislation does is it limits the ability of teachers to talk to students about accepting and knowing and respecting people with different sexual orientations. And that is wrong. Ultimately, I believe that this legislation itself, ironically, is in breach of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and I hope that at some point that becomes very clear on a legal level. The final point I want to make, the ultimate irony about, no, the second final point, the ultimate irony about this piece of legislation is this, is that we have a section in the legislation that talks about the right of people to be free from discrimination on the basis of their sexual orientation. And right after that section, we have another section which tells people that, tells teachers that they have to censor themselves when talking about the first section. How do you talk about the right to be free from discrimination that is included in our Human Rights Code without explicitly and primarily talking about sexual orientation? You can't do it. So in effect, this government has limited the degree to which kids in our schools can actually learn about our Human Rights Code. And again, not so bright. That is wrong. Finally, I just want to say this. I know that as we move forward, people's attitudes are going to change. They've changed in the 30 years that I've been, well, I've been around for a lot more than that, but since I've noticed the issue and been aware of the issue, they've changed, and they will change more in the future. And it's because of kids. It's because of the inherent willingness of children to look at each other and share with each other and play with each other without worrying about labels and perceptions and long-held attitudes. It's because of that that we move forward. And this bill attempts to strike at the heart of that very process which we rely upon to bring about true human rights. So that's the final reason why it's gone, why it needs to go, and why it's wrong. So thank you all for coming out today to share with us the beginning of the struggle, which I hope won't be too long, to get rid of what is clearly one of the most ill thought out pieces of legislation we have seen. And this is from a group that does a lot of ill thinking. Yet this piece of legislation still manages to come very close, if not to the very top, in the ill thinking competition. So we need to work together to get rid of it, and thank you for coming out to help us do that. And I hope you're not too hot. Have a good afternoon, and good luck to all of us.
Thank you everybody for coming. For those of you who missed my introduction,